Hi, I'm Sarah Ann Reed, owner of Pack Dynamics, holistic dog trainer, and animal communicator. It's my passion and mission in life to share this holistic approach with as many people and dogs as possible. I believe that all dogs deserve to be treated with respect, love, and kindness from a place of understanding that dogs are in fact a different species while honoring and accepting them as individual beings. The key to helping dogs is really learning how to be fluent in canine because they're never going to learn to speak English. Well, some people will say, well, my dog knows how to sit when I ask them to sit, but that's because you've trained them to sit on that word, right? You could have asked them to sit on the word apple and they'd still go into that sitting position. So often we contribute towards behavioral issues without realizing it because we're communicating with our dogs like we would any other family member, or trying to teach them something like we would a child, explaining, talking to them in full sentences. And usually people find when they start learning the language and culture of dogs that they're doing everything wrong and causing a lot of the behaviors. Let me share this example with you. Years before I found this approach, I adopted a dog from a shelter. She was such a sweetheart, a black lab mix. I knew nothing about her history. She was about 2 or 3 years old when I adopted her. A few months after bringing her home, I discovered that she was terrified of the fireworks. The first 4th of July, she was hiding under the bed, just trembling in fear. And I was trying to be a good dog mom. And I got on the ground beside the bed and I was talking to her and trying to comfort her. Shelby, everything's okay. Don't worry. I'm taking care of you. You don't need to worry about the fireworks. I'm here to protect you. Little did I know, I was just contributing towards that fear. And from her perspective saying, oh my gosh, I'm just as scared as you are and I hope the bombs don't drop on our house. So that's just one really easy example, right? If we comfort our dogs, we're actually contributing towards that behavioral issue. It was 7 years later, Shelby was 10 years old, when I finally discovered this approach. There were 2 other dogs in the home, and Shelby was the easiest dog of all 3. I didn't really expect to see a lot of changes in her. In the neighborhood that I lived in at the time, people were setting off fireworks a few days before the 4th and a few days after, just dragging out the torture for all of the animals. And I thought, I'm going to take advantage of this. So as 4th of July approached, every evening while the neighborhood fireworks were going off, I made sure that I was just hanging out in the living room with the dogs. I was reading a book, watching a funny movie, watching a sitcom, doing anything other than interacting with them. And as the fireworks went off, if they came over to me for comfort, I would just push them out of my space, which means there's nothing to worry about. If I had looked at them and talked to them and given them comfort when they came over, that would be like the equivalent of me saying, oh my gosh, I'm just as scared as you are. I also did a lot of yawning to show them that there was nothing to worry about. A few days later, when the 4th of July actually happened, I was so shocked. Shelby was lying on her dog bed, snoring while the fireworks went off. That's because I'd proven to her that I was a capable leader that she could trust and believe in, and she realized that everything was okay. A couple other things happened with Shelby that were such a delight and so unexpected. She had always been pretty aloof. She would lay on the other side of the room and come over and get affection when I called her. But she didn't really stay for very long, maybe a couple of minutes, and then she'd go and lay back down across the room by herself, and I just thought that's who she was. A couple months after implementing this training, I called her over to me. She had nice soft eyes and a smile on her face, and laid down beside me and let me give her tummy rubs and massages for 20 minutes straight. It was so great because I had convinced her that I was no longer the puppy or the equivalent of the 2-year-old child that she needed to take care of. I was in fact a leader that she could trust and respect and believe in. We're either the leader or the puppy, the adult or the 2-year-old. Shelby was also not usually likely to initiate playtime with the other two dogs. And about the same time, she started going over to them and doing the play bow and saying, "Play with me, play with me." It was so cute to see this new side of her and see her really blossom into the dog that she'd always been, but just buried under all of this stress and responsibility that she'd been feeling because she felt like she was supposed to be taking care of me, not the other way around. Bridging the communication gap. I used to do therapy work with people, and one day I was out on a walk with my dogs, and I thought, there's so many therapists out there and counselors for people, but who's doing this for dogs? Who's really out there helping dogs with behavioral issues? I did a lot of research, and I found that most training is based on controlling dogs and dominating them, not focused on understanding them and honoring them as an individual being or as a different species. When I discovered this approach, I was so excited. The lady that discovered the language and culture of dogs had been in the canine world for 20 years. She'd won awards at Crufts, she bred dogs, she did training with dogs, and she thought she knew everything she needed to know until she adopted this little dog that was so shut down and afraid, it just stayed under a table. It wouldn't come out to interact with her or the other dogs, and she thought, oh my goodness, everything that I've known my whole life is not working with this dog. And she started her quest to find an answer. She met Monty Roberts, the original horse whisperer, and asked him for advice. He said, "Well, I studied Mustangs in order to help the domesticated horses. I recommend you going back to where dogs originated from. Study the gray wolf." She lives in England, traveled all the way over from England to America, went to Yellowstone, and sat alongside the scientists that study the gray wolves every day. And she discovered their language and their culture. She realized that in the pack, there's a leader that makes all of the decisions to keep everyone alive. It's all about survival. She took everything that she learned, went back home, and implemented this with all of her dogs at home. Not just the little dog who was nervous and afraid, because, well, dogs will always be part of our family, but for dogs, we'll always be part of their pack. So she knew she needed to implement this with all of her pack members in order for that little nervous dog to completely believe in her and trust her. After a short amount of time, this rescue dog learns to feel comfortable and safe and come out of its shell, started interacting with her and the other dogs, and she was pleasantly surprised to realize that the other dogs in her home were a lot more calm and relaxed as well. Meal times, when she fed them, they were a lot less excitable. They were a lot calmer when she put the bowls down. They were no longer arguing with each other to see who could get out the door first, and walks were much more enjoyable. They weren't barking excessively anymore. Word spread in the community, and after a few years, she had worked with hundreds of families and their dogs and eventually started teaching this approach. I just fell in love with it when I discovered it because it really makes sense. Why not learn how to help dogs by understanding how they think, why they do what they do, and realizing how we contribute towards those behavioral issues without realizing it? It's absolutely a game changer. And think what a difference it makes for dogs to finally be understood and have someone communicate with them in a way that makes sense. I have been specializing in working with and helping dogs since 2008, and I've discovered that there are other factors that contribute towards dogs' behavioral issues. And behavioral issues really are just a way that a dog shows that they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or feeling like they need to be in charge of everything. That we contribute towards all of them without realizing it. Our emotions affect dogs, our energy, our expectations of them, what we believe about them, any labels that we put on our dog, they will absolutely live up to. What leadership means to dogs. Most people think that being a leader means you need to be very firm and stern in your voice, when in fact it's the opposite, right? I'm sure as a child, if you had a teacher that was really firm and stern, you probably didn't feel comfortable approaching them if you were struggling with something in the classroom. We all do much better with a teacher who is kind and loving and patient and approachable, and it's the same for dogs. You don't need to use the word no, you don't need to use a stern voice. It's much better if you always have a friendly tone and talk to them with love and kindness, patience and understanding. It's very important that you know how to communicate effectively as the leader, otherwise they're not going to understand you. Just like the story that I shared about Shelby. I was trying to comfort her and I was actually contributing towards her fear. It's also very important that as the leader you make all of the decisions. Not because you're trying to control them, but because dogs emotionally are like the forever 2-year-old child. They will always need boundaries. They'll always need you to provide food for them, to give them shelter, to protect them, to help them feel safe and comfortable in a world that they will never understand. As the leader, it's very important that you protect the pack, and how do you do that without being able to recognize danger? Know that when your dog is barking, they're not barking to annoy you or embarrass you in front of people. They're barking because they believe that it's their job to alert you of a potential threat. Maintaining order. This is very important for a leader to do. Sometimes dogs will try to maintain order in ways that are very difficult for us to live with. One of my very first clients was really struggling with one of their dog's behaviors. They had a 1-year-old dog who was randomly attacking the senior dog and randomly attacking the wife. The wife couldn't get up and move from one room into another without the dog growling at her, saying, "Don't you even think about it." Sometimes the wife was permitted to pet her, and when she wanted the wife to stop petting her, she'd snap at her hand and bite her. It was so bad that in the evening, if the wife wanted to go into the bedroom to go to bed, the husband had to remove the dog from the bedroom because she wouldn't let her in the bedroom at night. They had previously worked with a trainer who had given them 3 options. They said she needs to be on Prozac. That's like putting a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery, right? And a lot of times that medication can make a dog feel even more anxious because they're feeling really weird on that medication. Another option was to rehome her, and they said she's part of the family, we don't want to do that. The third option was to euthanize her, which in my opinion is a really technical term for murder. They had been told to kill their dog because she was doing this behavior. Long story short, they implemented the holistic approach that I share with my clients, and after a short amount of time, she stopped attacking the senior dog and stopped attacking the wife. The key was learning how to communicate effectively with her so that the dog was respecting the wife as her leader. Breeding, it's very important that the fittest, strongest, healthiest dogs are the dogs that are breeding. It's all about survival, isn't it? If you can't give someone a hug without your dog coming over and trying to participate in the hug, or you can't sit on the couch without your dog being in between you and another family member or a friend, or let's say your dog at nighttime always sleeps in between you on the bed, that's like the equivalent of a teenage daughter having her boyfriend over to watch a movie. They're sitting on the couch getting ready to start the movie, and the father walks in with a bowl of popcorn. Instead of handing it to his daughter, he asks her to scoot over, and he sits in between them holding the popcorn. No funny business is going on because he's right in between them. This is exactly what your dog is doing if they're always in between you, sitting on the couch, lying on the bed, or they're always wanting to seem part of the hug. Every dog is completely different. It's very important not to compare dogs in the home. They all have a different history. They have different personalities. Dogs get stressed and afraid of different things and deal with it differently. Some dogs are very tuned in to the human's emotions. Some dogs are a lot more aware of all of the items in the home and if something moves. Just because your dog is a certain breed doesn't mean that they're going to act a certain way. I help dogs of all different breeds. Sometimes my clients don't even know what their dog is. They're such a Heinz 57. And I can tell you in all of my experience, all dogs are capable of biting, having separation anxiety, and being labeled as an aggressive dog. Dogs that are growling or barking or lunging, showing any behavior like that, aren't aggressive. They're just nervous and stressed, and that's the only way that dogs have to show that they're feeling uncomfortable. If you and a friend both got a puppy from the same litter, and your friend's dog has grown up to be so just easygoing and relaxed, they just lie in the front yard, enjoy sunbathing, they never bark at anything, and your dog is barking at every person that goes by, they won't let visitors come in the home, they just seem anxious all the time. They have a completely different personality. Just like siblings in the home, right? Just because we're brought up in the same home doesn't mean that we have the same personality, the same interests, and deal with things the same. It's no different for dogs. Some dogs are really shy and nervous, and you invite a guest over and the dog is maybe hiding behind you and saying, "I'm not quite sure about you, I've never met you before." While another dog that's very bold says, "Oh, I know all of these different tricks. I can roll over, I can spin, I can play dead, I can shake." They love being in the limelight. You may have a dog who's really nervous, and when UPS delivers a package and it's sitting in the entryway, the nervous dog says, "Oh my gosh, I'm not quite sure about what's over there. I got to get a drink of water." And they take a longer route, a different route than usual, to go over and get a drink of water. Whereas maybe another dog in the home says, "Oh good, what is that? I'm going to go and investigate and see if there's any food in there for me." Some dogs are so tuned into our emotions that, let's say you come home and you've had a really stressful day. If the dog is naturally more nervous and tuned into how you're feeling, the moment that you walk through the front door, they're going to be feeling all of that energy and those emotions from you. And if you walk in stressed, your dog is going to say, "Oh my gosh, you seem stressed. Now I'm stressed and I don't know what to do." You may have another dog that acts like they couldn't care less. You've had the worst day ever and they barely lift their head up from the dog bed. Doesn't mean that they don't care about you. They're just more relaxed and easygoing. This training focuses on leading dogs rather than dominating them. For example, we don't use a shock collar. There's no vibration, because even a vibration for dogs can cause anxiety. That's not natural. There's no prong collar. None of it is done by force. It's also important that you're requesting things from your dog rather than giving them commands. And it doesn't mean that you can't ask them to do something like sit before you cross the street. It's more a difference of tone of voice. I'll use my dog for example. I always ask her to sit before we cross the street, but I don't say, "Sit, Tootsie," like she's in trouble. I ask her to sit with a friendly tone. "Sit, Tootsie." "Good, sit, Tootsie." That's the difference of a request and a command. This training focuses on giving positive rewards for behavior rather than them following orders all day long. If your dog is constantly looking at you, waiting for the next command, imagine how stressful that is. That would feel like walking on eggshells all the time, not knowing what to do, being afraid to do the wrong thing. The goal is that your dog is just calm and relaxed and happy and enjoying their life with you. This training focuses on teaching your dog self-control rather than controlling them. For example, it's very important that you go through the door first to show your dog that there's nothing to worry about. You've already assessed it. The coast is clear. Most trainers would say, ask them to sit, stay, and give them a release word. And they will wait for you to open up the door by doing that, but only because you're telling them to and giving them a command. I teach my clients to teach their dog to wait for them to go through the door first without looking at them or saying a word, right? I'm waiting for you to go through the door first because I trust you and I believe in you, and I know that you're going to help me feel safe and comfortable outside of the home. You can see the difference of your dog waiting for you to go through the door first because they've been told to, rather than feeling calm and relaxed and trusting in you, knowing that you're taking care of them. To understand more about the language and culture of dogs, I'll be talking more about how we stress our dogs out, what perceived danger is to dogs, how we cause anxiety when we arrive home and leave. I'll touch on feeding dogs, what the walk is like from your dog's perspective, and also talk about playtime and recall.